just 1 second as Sam connects to YouTube live. But we're excited to have you all here. And we're going to learn a lot about our newest fellow very, very soon. I don't want to spoil too much before I have to entirely do this intro.
Sorry, I haven't done this since a month ago. It's okay.
All right. Do we have to go ahead?
Yes.
All right. So I will go from the top here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this evening, this very, very cold evening in Philadelphia. I am here with our next Fab Fellow, Leah Huntingdon, and we are very excited to learn all about how the work is coming along. And we've got it strung up behind us here, and Leah's going to lead us through a bit of a behind-the-scenes process of how this exhibition, which is going to be in April at Da Vinci Art Alliance in Gallery 2, is going to all come together. And so I'm very excited to learn, and we've got a lot of computers and screens and the whole staff behind us at Da Vinci Art Alliance. So if you want to ask questions or hear, after hearing what Leah has to say or have any comments, we are going to have a bit of a Q&A at the end here, but if you're feeling super motivated and you need to write it down, go ahead and pop that question or comment in the chat, and we'll get to it as soon as we can. Leah, how are you doing?
Is there a way to,
Good.
is there a way to have captions? CC?
That's okay. That's okay. Everyone here who's joining this call is incredibly kind. They had to agree to be very kind as they joined the call. That was in the bylaws, so I'm glad everyone has clicked that button somewhere. We are going to get started. Why don't you go ahead and share your screen and take us through what's been going on in your studio.
Okay, I will. All right, hi everyone. Here. Okay. Oh, captions. Let's see. Can we turn captions on? Somebody asked for a caption.
I don't know.
Oh, I don't know how to. Yeah, we don't know how to do that. Sorry.
Maybe like present it. I think.
All right. I'll try to speak up. Is that better, Gobi?
Oh, I can't. I didn't know that it was gonna be.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we don't have that. But Gobi, we did buy a new product that will be. Well, it won't help tonight, but as of next week, we will have a new product that has live transcripts that are very, very good.
Okay. So Gobi, she said that they said that they're gonna get a new product to help with captions for next time.
I don't think I have options to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a very cheap Zoom account. We don't have that.
Honestly, the Zoom one isn't all that great.
Okay. All right. So let's see. So hi everyone. I'm here to I have a few different parts of my installation exhibit that I wanted to talk about. So I thought I would take like 20 or so minutes to talk about the different aspects of the installation. And then I have some specific questions about these parts that are highlighted in green. So I have some specific questions that I wanted to get like input on and ideas from anyone who has them. And then we can like talk about whatever else people want to talk about. The papers. Yeah, those are my papers falling off the wall, but they're just like sample papers. All right, so the different elements of the installation are these jewelry pieces from the textural lineage series that I've been working on over the past 5 years. And I'm still working on developing the plans for mounting them. So that's something we'll talk about at the end. Then the main body of the new work for this installation is this piece called Prayer Beads for the Anthropocene. So that's what those pieces up in the air are. And it'll be those more of those sculptures and then the a video projection on the wall behind them. And then there'll be handmade papers embedded with photographs that'll be on the walls of the gallery space. Some large format prints of photographs in the space, and then some records and like resource area by the window. And so this is what the gallery on the second floor looks like. So the beads are going to be approximately like moving through the space like this big gray line. The projection will be this blue box on the wall. And then the pieces on the jewelry will be mounted along the walls of the space. And then the photographs and the paper, handmade paper, will also be on the walls. And then this will be where the like resources and things are by the window. All right, so first, I'm just going to go through the different parts and share some pictures and talk a little bit about what these different aspects of the exhibit are planned to be. So the first few slides I'm going to share are pieces that from this textural lineage series. So this series is all incorporating materials and imagery from the built landscape in Philadelphia. Most of them, most of them incorporate brick. And most of the brick is from a specific spot along Schuylkill Ave, just south of South Street by the Schuylkill, from a few warehouses that have now been demolished. But I started working on the series before they were demolished, and and now they are. So this series is all about kind of responses to ideas about location and public spaces, how traces kind of change over the course of time, and then also thinking about how value works for objects and how materials and objects and experiences are valued or not valued and kind of discarded or let get lost. They also think about these like personal experiences that kind of unfolds as we move through these shared spaces and then how time passes and changes those public spaces. And these are all small jewelry to be worn. So they kind of aim to be like these portals that kind of carry these ideas and reflections for the wearer and the viewer. So that's a little overview of what that series is about. And then this is, I put them in order, the pieces, as I developed them. So this was the first one, and these are little bricks that are set in silver bezels with a steel cable strand, and then a fabricated clasp silver there. So it's kind of combining these the found materials with the silver, and then it's kind of showcasing the different color schemes and the different textures and like the kind of microcosm of a bigger space in each of these little tiny shards. So that's that piece. And then this piece was the second one in that series. And so this one is based on a photograph that I'll show later from the warehouse by Schuylkill Ave, where there was a standpipe coming out of the wall. And standpipes are for the fire department if there's a fire. They're like empty tubes that kind of go through the building to bring water or like healing to a building when it's on fire. And so the standpipe is kind of an interesting symbol about like containment and like moving energy inward to a structure. And they're also just really interesting looking. So this was like a tiny little version of a standpipe that goes through this shard, which is from that building. And this is the front and this is the back. This is the pin stems. Here it has a double pin stem since it's heavy. And then I kind of designed it so that the framework on the back would kind of showcase different parts of the cement and the brick combination and kind of help you focus in on kind of like frame these little portions, these little compositions in the material and kind of help you think about the different parts of it. So that's that one. And then this one doesn't have any brick in it. This one is made out of brass. It was a sheet brass that I carved and sanded and formed into these spiraling components. But it's very much drawn from like the arches along the tops of windows or buildings with the brick, the way that the brick lines up. So that's what that looks like. And then this is a found chain, and then I fabricated the rest of it, including the little clasp, which I'll show you. And I was proud of my clasp, so I put a little picture of the clasp in here where you can see it bigger. And there's the tiny little tubes inside that the rivet goes through. There's a tube soldered to the end of the chain that, that the rivet goes through to hold the end of the chain in there. And then this is what the back of that one looks like. The next one I started and then circled back to last year was to finish up. But this was the next one was this chrysalis necklace. I don't have the best photographs of this one yet, so you'll have to come and see it in real life. but this one is these silver links that go through each of these little balls, and then this is like fabric scraps that's wound around, and each one of these little balls is a little bit of a different composition, and it kind of transitions from more gray and then gradually adds more color as you go through, and then shifts over to the warmer palette on this side, and then the color kind of fades out to the dark brown. And then this one is the neck piece that I worked on during 2020. I spent most of 2020 because I didn't go into the studio the way that I had been into NextFab to do my jewelry work. And so I'd finished this pendant a few years prior, but didn't have a neck piece for it. And so I did this fiber project of making the neck piece. And so this was like it was a very like meditative kind of project. I would set out the fabric on a cork board and stretch it out and kind of compose different layers and textures and stitch them, and then roll it up to gradually like build up the this like tube. And then there's this blue or this brown like webbing material that encases the whole thing and kind of makes it all continuous all the way around. So that's what that one is. And then this is what it looks like from the back. And that's the back of the pin or of the pendant. I can make this bigger. Yeah. So that's like the back of the pendant. And then there's snaps here that connect the pieces. And this one used again, like mostly scraps from other projects that I'd been working on. And then, and some leather that I found in the discard bin at NextFab. And then these snaps are from my grandmother's collection of fiber materials that I incorporated into the clasp there. And so those are the pieces, those are the jewelry pieces that are going to be part of this installation. And then the new work that I'm making for it are these paper sculptures that are hanging behind you. Hanging behind me in front of you. And so this project is really about about a lot of different things, but it's partly is like making a space for the jewelry pieces to inhabit and kind of be kind of build on the same themes and then kind of expand the themes too. So first, the Anthropocene, here's a little definition of what the Anthropocene is. So this is not everybody agrees on this terminology, but this is like a proposed epic for describing the time period that we're in now. human influence on the planet and how it's changed the whole way that the world is working and the way that the environment and the atmosphere and all the different aspects of the environment and weather and everything is just impacted by the human presence. And so this piece, being prayer beads for the Anthropocene, is thinking about, is building off of the etymology of the word bead. In Old English comes from the word for prayer. And so I thought that was really interesting that, that just regardless of if something's a prayer bead or not, just the idea of just the word for bead itself comes from this, comes from prayer and how that's like connected. It's like one of the primary like early skills that you develop for a lot of people, people who have like full motor range and development, develop the coordination to use beads, use their hands together and thread beads. It's like kind of one of those early skills that you look for in children as they're developing to make sure that their fine motor skills are working. So it's like this very kind of human action to thread a bead onto a strand of some sort. And I just thought it was interesting how that word is related to prayer, and then it's like a inherently repeated manual action. And it kind of helps you think about like the meditation that comes from repeated actions and repeated steps or rituals, the comfort and solace that can kind of come in repeating an action or paying attention to breath or that kind of thing. So that's part of what this installation is exploring. It's also this meditation on my own accumulation and use of resources. And so all of the pieces, like all the components that go into it are things that that I've accumulated either through like the packaging of my food that I eat, or gifts from people in different times in my life, or scraps of fabric, or et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of using and incorporating materials that I've accumulated over time. And it's trying to kind of, it's a piece that kind of comes out of this thinking about resources and waste, and how all of this is not shared equally among people, and people in privileged positions get to have more resources, and people in less privileged positions end up with having the waste from other people accumulate around them. And so it's kind of thinking about all this pain that's in our world and in this hard time, and trying to find ways to kind of comfort and hold ourselves together so that we can keep moving forward and helping each other even in this hard time. So that's what this piece, that's like some of the things that go into this piece. And so again, this gray line is kind of the map of where the beads will be hung up. And so they'll be suspended in the air, and they're kind of taking their form from the form of vines on wires. And so these are all from my backyard at different times of the year, going from like the lush summer when everything is really, vibrant and exuberant, and then through the winter when everything gets really wiry and stringy and really beautiful silhouettes. So that's the kind of idea of this, is that we're gonna have lines going through the gallery like power lines, and then the beads are gonna start in like a clump all at the top, and then they're gonna descend down through the space and then go into like some like weeds along the wall is my hope. And so that is the plan. And so this is what I've got so far that I'm going to share today. So this was my prototype for the first, for the application for this residency. And so this was the first version of this, and this is a mixture of, so this is chicken wire and then handmade paper, and then a lot of like plastic sewn onto it, and some found beads. So it's mixed media and mixed techniques, using a lot of fiber techniques. And then this plastic piece, this is foam and plastic. Oh yeah, this is here. Yeah, here's this piece. So this is foam and plastic. And then it's enameled, this old copper tubing that a friend gave me, that I chopped up into these little beads and formed little tubes and then enameled them. So this is copper, enameled copper. That is thread onto this foam and plastic form. So there'll be more pieces like that. And then a lot of the pieces I have so far are these paper framework ones. And so the idea, this is like just a little sketch virtually, which kind of, you can get another better sense of the actual space, which is pretty exciting. But so these are, so far I've just had pictures of these because I don't have space in my apartment to put them all together. So I've just taken photos and then kind of combined them. So this is the idea of like these pieces that will connect and hang like this. And so the prayer beads are these different found objects. So like this is a can, food can that's that I oxidized to make a striped pattern on it. And it was actually from an art project from 8 years ago that I didn't finish. And so that's like an old, it was reused then and kind of reclaimed from that project. And then this is another version of the enamel beads is going to be on this copper wire that's forged into a swirly form. And yeah, and you can see that guy up in the corner there. And then I have a couple more photos. Yeah, and then here's another close-up of the one I showed you just now. And then this is, again, that one, a close-up of the like wire, the copper wire enamel pieces in the backyard. All right, so those are the beads, and then the strands. So the strands that the beads thread onto are these paper forms a lot of the time, or they're the copper, the forged copper like that guy, or the plastic and foam like this guy. But the majority of the strands are these bigger structures that are the chicken wire and paper, and then other found materials, a lot of plastic for some of them. So like this is the details here, and that's the one that's hanging up in the middle back here, this guy. And then again, that uses a bunch of, it's plastics and also like fabric scraps too. And then here's some details of it.
Wow.
And then it's, yeah, I think I said, and then it's like handmade paper is what the colorful parts are. And I've got some examples where that paper came from. So then as I've been getting better at doing the paper and getting clearer about that, then I've been making more pieces that are just the paper, which have a lot of really interesting textures and a lot of cool potential in just making these paper pieces. So that's a paper one. This is a green paper one. And then this is an example for one of the buildings behind my house that is that same color scheme as that green one. And then this is the most recent one is this orange one. And this one, I think, yeah. Yeah, this one is I think this is like, as far as like the skill of it, I'm getting a lot better with making them. So like going from the beginning where I wasn't quite as sure what I was doing and didn't have as much of a technique, I think I'm getting better with the technique of it, because this one, like the color gradation works really nicely. And also the texture of it came out like the smoothest so far, and it's like the sturdiest one. So that's a new one. And then, oh yeah, and then this one, so I have some samples here, and then this is a part of the process is this documenting all the papers that go into the handmade paper that goes onto each form. And so for this newest one, my aunt sent me a box of her old papers, including like some of her work from when she was working on her dissertation and a bunch of other kinds of things. And so this is like kind of some of my older like family histories kinds of stuff, and then a bunch of my stuff as well. I've been clearing out my childhood home and getting my old papers that I had randomly saved. And so I'm like sorting through that stuff and then keeping certain things that are good colors. And then the process is I kind of think about the colors I'm going through for, and then do kind of draw on the color theory and think about like what I need to combine to get that color, and then blend it into the slurry, and then make all these different sheets. And so then they're all wet sheets. And then and then after they dry, I do a whole series. So they start to dry a little bit, but then they're still very wet. And then I just tear it up and press it onto the chicken wire form. And then it's almost like a clay. It's like a paper clay that comes in like little tiny slabs that you can form and blend together. And it's so interesting, and it's so much faster than metals or stitching, which is also a really interesting, like the speed of it is really interesting because you can like finish a whole thing in an afternoon, and then it dries and it's got this really nice, like dense kind of shell structure to it. So these are all the papers that went into this one, the orange one. So those are the kind of the strands that'll be moving through the space. And then behind them on the wall will be that projection, which will include some of these different photographs and some audio from the sounds from different like places in Philadelphia, and like that explore. It really thinks about like the water and earth, air, water and fire kinds of imagery. And so they kind of like these different video images will be projected, and then they kind of like morph into each other. And those are some of the images kind of in that transition between one to the next. So that'll be going behind the beads on the wall. And then the handmade papers. And so then these ones are little 9 by 9 inch little square papers that have photographs embedded in them. And so I've cut the photos up and set them into the paper as I'm making them. And so then it's the same with these. I have been keeping records of and like documenting the combination of papers that goes into each one of these little sheets. And so, for example, here's a couple. So these are ones from like the mail from now. And then this is like a Valentine that my sister gave me a long time ago, and like a bill. And then those all went into making this paper. And then all of these ones went into making this one. So those are the images that'll be on the walls. And then I'm also going to have these somewhat large format photos. And so I'm kind of going to be doing different. I haven't finalized all the ones that'll be included yet, but I have 2 of them done. But as I was working on this with Kelly over at NextFab, I learned that the scores of photos that I have, the hordes of them, are not, they're not in good enough resolution to print as big as I was hoping to. And so I thought that was an interesting thing that, you know, we collect all of this stuff and we collect all this data and we use all these resources. And then when we want to use them, sometimes they don't let us use them the way that we had hoped to. So that's like kind of just an interesting like metaphor, of just the way that things work. We accumulate all this stuff and then we can't quite use it exactly how we'd want it to. And so that brings me to things to figure out. And so one of the things I'm figuring out with those photos, I'm wondering if this summarizes what I just said. So I'm going to definitely do some, because I have figured out I can get them to about like this size of like, you know, around like 20 inches tall. So I can definitely still print some of the photos in large format like that. But then I'm considering like maybe doing some like collage pieces, kind of like how this is in the back here. And like kind of just doing these like cutouts and swirl forms and things like that, that could kind of relate to the rest of the imagery and still get those colors and textures in the big size, but kind of make up for the lack of nice resolution in the prints themselves. So that's one of the things to figure out. And maybe should I stop and ask people what they think about that? Or do you think I should keep going?
Whatever you think.
Well, let's keep going.
Okay, I'll keep going and then we can come back. So think about that. Think about, yeah, everybody think about that. And then I'll tell you the other parts of it, the questions I have. So yeah, so the collage element is one of the questions. And then I'm also working on these ideas for how to mount the jewelry pieces still. So this was one of the ideas that Bryant, who is here at the Da Vinci Art Alliance, he developed this approach when this piece was in a show before, where it's like a little wood cylinder or a little wood disc that's set on top of a kind of more narrow one. And then those are directly put into the wall, and then you just kind of like hang the neck piece over it. So I was thinking we could do something like that, but then also like put a print on top of it of some of the textures from the photos, which might be kind of cool. And so this is from the side, this is like the wall, and this is like the little wood piece and the bigger wood piece, and then this is what it would look like from the front. The drawback of that is that for some of the pieces like that, the brass swirl one and and maybe the textural lineage one too, is that the front disc would kind of block some of the details in that top of the neck piece. So that's something. So I was thinking about that and playing around with that idea. And then another idea that he had that I thought was really cool was this brackets idea. And so like just putting brackets directly into the wall that would just kind of like hold the piece just onto the wall. The problem with just that is that that there's like these dynamic backs to these pieces that would be cool to be able to share. And so then I was talking to Kelly at Next Fab, and she was thinking like maybe like using acrylic mirror behind the pieces and just like setting them out a little bit. And so I've been thinking about it some more. So my first idea was like really labor intensive of like, what if you could cut wood swirls out that were like big wood pieces like this, that then you could put the brackets onto, and the necklaces would kind of hang over the edge, and then this part could be the acrylic mirror. And I was like, that would be really cool, but I don't have a lot of good woodshop skills. And so then I was thinking, well, what if I printed photos and cut the photos out, and then I had just a few pieces of wood inset on top of the photos. So that's more what I'm leaning towards now. And then I thought, the easiest would be like just like semicircles that are like the same for most of the pieces. Instead of making them like different little swirly pieces, I could just get a piece of like blocks of wood like they have at Home Depot. So like just maybe getting these wood pieces and cutting them apart in half, and then like mounting them there and putting brackets in them to hold the neck pieces, and then mirror acrylic under here. And then this would also kind of work with the collage idea over in this corner. Like you could just kind of have the collage elements kind of come out of that and go onto the rest of the wall. So that's kind of what I'm leaning towards with this. And I haven't figured out yet the brooch because that's kind of the tricky one because it's small but I think maybe it could work the same way of like, and just kind of hang in front of a mirror. So that's one of the questions. And then I did go to Home Depot and look at things. And there's these discs that are kind of ready to go, but then there's also like other kinds of forms. And like, I thought maybe something like this could be interesting because it's kind of like mimics the, like what you see on the tops of buildings. And so something like that might be something to think about. So those are the mounting ideas. And then what else I have to think about is what's going to go, like what all to include in that, the records and resources section. Because I've been thinking about, I definitely want to include some of the photos of like where materials came from, but I could go kind of really in depth with that and just like have a lot of information about like, you know, what dates the photos were from and what dates things were worked on. And, you know, if we could go really into the data behind things and like, you know, I don't know if that's really interesting to anybody else. But I think I have to, for my work, think a lot about data and collect information and keep track of things. So I find it interesting sometimes to do in other contexts. And then I also was thinking about like a map of Philadelphia with little French knots on like marking all the different locations where the photos came from. Because I had originally, when I made this proposal, had thought of doing more like embroidery and stitches with things. But for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into all of that for this exhibit. But I thought French knots on the locations might be cool. And then there could also be old photos of the locations and especially those warehouses where the textual lineage pieces came from. And then I'm also thinking of having like just different like articles and things, articles and also like related text and quotes about all these different kinds of dynamics of trying to navigate the world right now with all of the problems and pain in it. And so that's kind of my question is like how important or interesting are all these records to somebody else? And like where materials come from. Because I think it kind of goes back to like thinking those like ideas of like value and how things are valued and like provenance for art objects and like kind of like harkens to all those kinds of traditions. So those are my thoughts for like the window seat. And then there's like a little chair set up there in the gallery so people can look at it. These are some different quotes that are some examples of things that like I'm pretty sure I'm gonna include like little quotes like this on cards on that table and then include like some of the photographs of the papers that went into the pieces. So these are, I won't read them all, but these are just some examples of things that could go on that table. Yeah, and so then that brings me to my last kind of areas of prioritizing because I only have like February and March to finish up the rest of the things for the show. And so I need to do this thinking about, more or less complicated mounting setups. Like, is this like the photography and the kind of wall collages, is that feasible? And then I also feel like I've just gotten to a really better skill with the paper sculptures. So I kind of want to do more of them now that I've got better at them. But I also have kind of met the goal I had of how many to make. So I'm kind of thinking about if I should prioritize those. If I should bother with like these wall collages or if I should just stick with the kind of 20-inch tall large pictures for the sake of simplicity. And then I've got about like 12, I think, of the paper, the 9 by 9 inch paper squares. So thinking about, would that be good to prioritize? And then like more or less detail in the resources area. So yeah, those are my questions. Yeah.
You got a lot of comments in the chat.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
cool. Okay.
Let's go check out the chat for a minute. And in the meantime, I'm going to go take a closer look at some of these artwork that's been behind Leah the whole time.
Oh, cool.
Leah, do you want to keep sharing your screen or do you want
Oh.
to switch over to?
Oh, right. No, yeah, I can stop sharing. Sorry. Right, then you guys can see better.
We'll be
Yeah.
able to see both. Okay, I'm gonna start reading comments to you.
Okay.
Bill said, to get photos bigger on the walls, you can make screen prints from photos at larger scale
Oh, okay.
or print and rescan them at a higher resolution.
Oh, cool.
Which that's a good idea. I think.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I never thought of that before. Good
That's
idea,
awesome.
Bill.
Thank you, Bill. That's a great idea. Yeah, screen
I
print.
teach screen printing at Fleischer, and there might be some people who could help you with that. There's some really simple steps in Photoshop, but also as I was typing, I realized just rescanning the photos at a higher resolution can then get it to a place where you could then have a poster printed.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really helpful.
Leah, I was thinking we could also probably try to reprint on like a more richer textured paper, and maybe we would be able to get it bigger in that way by kind of like losing some of that information by like having more texture, and then it would speak a little bit more to the handmade paper pieces as well.
Oh,
So
cool.
we could
Yeah, cool.
share that.
And then
Wow.
Eva says, I like the idea of the pieces being joined with the photographs. It reintegrates the materials like the brick with their original environment.
Oh, cool.
Gobi answered with, yes, that integration is important to the transformation that happens in making these pieces. Also, I like having view from back. Having as many of these 3D pieces works for that. Origin material photos and photos of locations is how important? Very. Bill says there is a historical preservation aspect to this work. There are lots of folks collecting info on historic buildings and neighborhoods who can help with that info.
Yeah.
Kit suggested if you're looking for wood, salvaged wood may be more interesting and could tie into the buildings originally in Philadelphia.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
They also agreed with Gobi that is very important. Eva said, what about a pipe element instead of wood brackets to reiterate the standpipe of the brooch?
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Gobi says the prayer beads, I like these to not be presented together separate from the other objects, but integrated with all the others as they contain a unifying idea for this. Kit said, my opinion is that maybe the collage photos could be too much going on. The eye will need little rest spots. There is a lot going on in the space and that might distract.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Linda asks, I never heard the word Anthropocene before and looked it up on Google. How exactly do the beads relate to the human impact on the planet's climate and ecosystems?
Yeah, well, that's kind of, it's both like a personal, kind of a personal way to, or personal practice of processing my own waste and my own kind of like reprocessing my own waste and figuring out ways to do the manual actions that help me feel calm and kind of help me get grounded, so I can do what I need to be doing in the world. So that like doing those processes, those manual processes of art making, but then using these, all this waste that I've accumulated, or waste or resources, depending on how you look at it. But it's a lot of like the packaging from my food and like, or like things that were shipped to me, or just like other resources that have come to me And that would be things that are discarded. And then it's trying to use those things into these processes that I need to be doing to be able to cope with the world are using this waste that would have gone back into the waste stream. And maybe I also think about like, oh, I'm just combining plastic and fiber and paper that could have been recycled. Like I'm kind of just combining it so it'll be even harder to recycle. So like maybe I'm making it even worse waste than it was if I just recycled it. So it's kind of like just so it's like my personal kind of interaction with the world and this, our planet's climate, and the ways that I participate in making it worse and the ways that I try to make things better through being more conscientious.
Well, Linda says art is never waste. Joe Ellen says, it's so interesting to learn about your process in installing your work. The jewelry is just beautiful.
Oh, thank you, John. Cool.
Yeah, I agree with what Kit said, I think. Like,
Yeah.
while you were talking through your presentation, I started thinking about like how many different like colors and like collage elements and like how much is going on in this space. And I do think it would be a good idea for like rest spots.
Yeah.
And like, even my brain is getting disjointed about this, because on one hand, I feel like it's about Philly and Philly is disjointed, so like, I kind of like the chaos of your show, but also like, I don't want to lose anything. And I feel like it's starting to become like, kind of like the I Spy game of like finding all the little details, which again is Philly. So
Right,
I'm not
yeah.
against it either.
Yeah. But it's supposed to be more about ways to find calm in that chaos. And so trying to give the rest space for the eye will probably be helpful to like focus in on that like calm, like the frames for things. Like making the space be a frame for some of the more organic kinds of things that are happening. Yeah. And then that also is like a simpler, like just working on trying to print things, like some of those strategies you had, Bill, of like, or Kelly, the paper, like just that could make things just a little bit bigger. And then you can still have some of those, but then they can kind of stay as just like rectangles that are not so much for the eye to figure out.
And if I'd like to add kind of on that same
Yeah.
topic is I'm noticing that the textures that are coming from these photographs are of things that are already modular. So one possible option, instead of actually blowing up a large image, is to create a digital collage with multiple different kinds of facades and patterns and bricks and fences and things like that. And so your actual file can be incredibly large if it's a digital collage that is printed at full res.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Robert, sir, I have to yell because Bill let me know that no one can hear me. Robert Zerber says, I have a question about conveying value and how scale plays into that. Also about how separating the source from the object.
I kind of it's better to talk than to try.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the idea of conveying value is really an interesting thing. It's been done in a bunch of art that I've seen, because so for instance, sourcing the bricks and putting them into tiny little silver frames gives you a really idea of that's clear as how you're transmitting the value, because when you wear something on your person, that automatically gives it a very personal thing. And obviously the silver and the encasing and the taking something which is larger and putting it into a personal space automatically conveys the value. What I had a question about was the idea of having to make things big, both in the photographs that you're talking about that you're having a problem with, and in the prayer beads. Prayer beads are small. Prayer beads are handleable. And I like the idea of taking the paper that comes from real the sources that you have, your old, the photographs and all this stuff, and making them into something. But if you have to explain them on a wall text, well, this goes, I'm wondering, first of all, why do prayer beads, they lose their intimate meaning when they're so huge. And similar to a lot of the other things that I understand, you want to make an installation that grabs the eye and that's big, but scale in this case, it takes away from the personalness, and certainly the removal of the meaning onto something that somebody reads and puts into their mind, as opposed to handles. I don't know if you know Kate McCammon's work. Her work is about meaning and value and memory, very similar to what you're doing. And she's able to do it in a certain way, which really packs a punch, but it's small. So I'm wondering if a lot of the questions that you're having about, how to do this and how to do that, even having a mirror behind something, it's like, if these things could be handled, I mean, I don't know how practical that is, but that would get down and dirty to what you're trying to do, I think, both as a comforting device, like prayer beads can be, and also to have a more intimate experience. And so I think a lot of the problems that you may be having have to do with making it into a larger scale thing, when perhaps that's a force that is not.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting when you said that about the beads, because it's like the jewelry is bringing the brick smaller, and the prayer bead installation is bringing the beads bigger. So it's like a kind of interesting parallel of like, because the jewelry pieces are like very small, intimate objects, and that's like what they're about. But making like a space for them, making like a new space for them, is what this project is kind of about. And I guess, and it's kind of like expanding, like, I think I've been finding this like doing things bigger and faster is really interesting for my art practice, because it's just like, for the past, I got my membership in 2016. So I've been working on this series with the brick for like 2016 to 2020. For 4 years, I'd made those like 5 pieces. And so I like worked very small and precise and tiny. And then in 2020, I worked on the neck piece, and it was very much like layers and winding and wearing my optivisors and like zooming in and just myself. And so this is kind of a step in exploring like the process of making the paper pieces is kind of similar to the winding and the winding and the wrapping and the compressing, but it kind of is expanding outward instead. And so I guess it's kind of exploring ways of just building on the processes that are intimate and small, but in a bigger, different direction. And yeah, how does that relate to how did I do with responding to that?
The first part's clear. I guess what I was saying is that with regard to the prayer beads, if they are ways to calm, to center, is the scale personal enough when they become so large? And second of all, is kind of deconstructing the materials from things which had a value to you, or things which have a value not necessarily to you, but in their own, what they are, originally or where they came from, had a value, and then deconstructing it. And I think it's an interesting idea to take something and macerate it in the way that you make the paper and somehow figure out how the original meaning could come through without wall text. I don't know if that's possible, because the idea of then having the wall text just to define, it's one step away. It's a remove.
Mhm.
And that to me, in general, about conceptual art, is hard, because if, that's just me, but it's hard.
Yeah,
I like
yeah.
to have the visceral nature of the piece itself, the object itself. And I wonder whether or not that's actually conveyed. And it might be, I
Yeah.
believe in magic, and maybe it is. But I don't know that.
I think also the pieces, because one of the things I like about installations, they're my favorite, not all, but my favorite installations have been things where you go into it and then it's this space that kind of, that you can find all these details in and you can stand in different ways in relation to objects and find all the details, in the tiny surfaces on the things that are swarming around you. And so I think maybe, because really there's a lot of detail on this paper, like all the paper has like the grid in it from the screen. So like there's a lot of like tiny textures on here that maybe like combining with the blanks, sort of the blank space, like what Kit had said about like kind of having blank space to kind of show, kind of be a way to focus in, like maybe that like you as the viewer make your experience from how you interact with the materials and the details on the surfaces of the things hanging up, because there's lots of little details in these big forms. And then it'll all be like individual based on where you are, how you situate yourself in the midst of this like ring of the beads cascading through the space.
I was just thinking that if the prayer beads themselves are addressing the overabundance of human-made waste, in a certain sense, they almost need to be large because they are made up of that human waste. And the point of addressing that issue is that there is too much of it. There's too much matter. And that's the problem. So to make a small prayer bead of waste almost implies that the amount of waste is small.
Right.
Also, as you were talking about installation, me as a human moving through a room with an oversized, prayer bead puts me in relationship to that issue. I feel like the larger the issue, the larger it physically could be, therefore dwarfing me. And it could in some way relate to the kind of impending doom, or the size of the problem is
Right.
larger than me, which is quite alarming. I think that these are interesting issues to play out now, and because you have a few months to go and see where you can take some of these.
And like not relying on wall text. Like I was thinking of it more being like if the window area would just have resources to look at secondarily if people wanted to. But I think it's a good thought but I also was wondering about wall text. So I think the idea of like not relying on wall text makes a lot of sense.
Sylvie has her hand raised.
I had some thoughts both about scale and size and about the prayer beads in particular. I liked the way they were introduced with the idea of the Anthropocene as something that we pass through and change as we move through and are in turn changed by it, and then are changed again, by what we've done to change it. And these prayer beans, it seems to me, they're small, but something that you encounter a multiplicity of times grows in your mind, even when it's small. So by taking these prayer beans, rather than having them in one place just for themselves, have them show up in every one of the other kinds of objects so that we see them again and again and again, and use them as a unifying idea, the idea of transformation of ourselves, transformation of what we change, and then back again, involuted. That's,
Yeah. Yeah, that was really interesting.
That's a lot to chew on.
That was a lot to chew on. Thank you.
We had
Yeah.
like a moment of silence.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that like that going through. I really like that that idea of like moving through this, like they become something that we move through and kind of that enlarges in our mind as we use them. Yeah.
Leah, are you having a chance to read the chat? I just wanted to not have the comment from Margaret get lost.
Oh yeah. No, I didn't read it. They're so loud. Yeah, prayer beads for a larger space to hold. Holding space is what we were trying to do on an intimate scale. Holding space on a more expansive scale is what we need to do to redeem the Anthropocene into something that heals rather than destroys the earth. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of, and I think that same idea that, yeah, of like that this as a bigger problem and issue, it needs we need like bigger prayer beads. We need bigger prayer beads for this problem.
If Catholicism taught me anything, bigger is better.
I just wanted to mention, if you're really interested in making your pictures bigger, I have used Karen Mock as a photographer of art. She could take a picture that you have that's smaller, and her capacity for resolution is much greater because she has like really good cameras and all, and she could make it as large as you want.
Oh,
So
cool.
you're not less necessarily limited if you don't want to be.
Yeah. Okay. What is her name?
Karen Mock. I'll put her email in the thing here.
Oh, thank you.
I can send it to you later.
Okay, cool.
She's a wonderful photographer, and she does a lot of art.
Cool.
I will second Linda with that. That Karen is who I recommend everyone to if they want professional photos done.
Yeah,
cool.
I've worked with her 2 times.
Cool.
Up.
Everyone loves Karen.
Yay. I
Thank
mean,
you.
I once asked her, and she said that she could really put it on the side of a barn if I wanted, because I wanted something really big. And
Yeah.
I said, "Are you sure is this going to work?" She said it would fill up the size of a barn.
Oh, Linda, I actually have an interesting side note based on what you just said. I learned yesterday that Karen took the inside of a church that was full of fresco paintings. When they moved from their location in North Philly to Elton's Park, she photographed the entire church's frescoes, and then like they were able to repaint them in the new location because of the photos that she had blown up. So another recommendation for Karen.
Hey, Leah, I had an idea, being that you're really getting the technique down of working with the paper prayer bead sculptures. I'm wondering if you can use that newfound skill to actually house the jewelry. It's a way to get it off the wall. You might have to kind of think through, you don't want it to distract, and I'm not seeing those textures in person, but just thinking instead of kind of pulling in some wood or a different material and process than what you're already expanding to do for this show. I'm wondering if you can find some way to use those paper sculptures to bring the jewelry into the space. So you don't have to play with the mirrors behind it. And it's more, you're almost attaching it to the body and the weight of these prayer beads in some way, which brings them to life in this exciting way. I feel like the last, your latest paper sculpture had this like bodily bone texture to it, or that's how it's reading through the screen anyway. And just something to think about, maybe if you're feeling like it's stuck against the wall or you want it to be in space. It's a way to kind of do that maybe.
Yeah. And that's kind of speaking to Gobi's idea of like having the aspects of the beads be kind of incorporated, connecting everything in the show.
Yeah, like looking through your sketches, it just felt like that wood and print thing was something separate. And it would be something you'd struggle to show the beautiful clasp you made and the back of the piece. You're always kind of struggling with that wall. So bringing that into the space, which, security might come into play with jewelry pieces, I know, but I'd be happy to kind of brainstorm more about that with you. I've seen some cool exhibits where the jewelry is not stuck on a wall or stuck behind a case. And I think there are creative ways to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and Eva's idea of the pipe too, I've been thinking about. I had another friend who said, like, what about like hanging pipes? And then they could the pipes could be hung from this, from the wire, and then the jewelry could like drape over the pipes kind of.
Yeah.
Be like a cool.
Yeah, and the paper can be a bridge between that, because I think the jewelry is, you don't want them to feel just kind of thrown on a pipe. They're very considered and very intimate in that way. So kind of bridging that gap between that industrial pipe and that really amazing high craft jewelry, that paper can be that medium in between that you kind of solve that with.
Interesting. Yeah. That'll take some thinking. That's a good idea though.
You're going to be on the first floor, right?
The second floor.
Or the second floor?
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any comments or questions? Leah, do you have any other questions to ask anyone?
Let's see. Yeah, I think. No, I don't think so. I'm looking at my little list of questions, I think. Do you guys think, do you guys think more of the paper squares would be good? More of the photographs, the handmade paper squares on the walls, maybe leaning towards that instead of the bigger prints would be better.
Yeah, I would love to see how far you can push paper to transform the space. I think it would be interesting.
Yeah. Cool.
I had a couple of questions though. I think that Kit's point about the bigger photographs and so forth is, I think you got so much going on that you'll detract with that element. But I also wondered, I think those smaller squares are very beautiful. So if it was a choice of getting rid of one kind of element, I would probably get rid of the larger. But the other thing is that the prayer beads themselves, when I look at them, they don't look like prayer beads. They look like coral, or they look like a coral reef. The fact that you said they're prayer beads is okay, but if I were to look at them, I would never guess they were prayer beads.
Yeah, they're abstracted. They're just like really thinking about the form of like energy moving through containers and like how like energy, like energy and connection and kind of life force
Yeah,
moving
sort of.
through containers and vessels of people and people and.
I guess what's missing is the fact that prayer beads have this, they move down into a very tiny thing, and then they open up again, tiny.
Mhm.
And that, to me, really, that demarcation has that, that what they're originally for was to meditate on one, and when you're
Mhm.
finished, go to the next. And there has to be that demarcation of the individual beads for them to make sense in terms of that. And when I was looking at the detail of them, I didn't get that gratification of seeing that. So I'm just
Yeah.
it's just an observation.
Yeah, and the prayer beads are also very uniform. They're like all the little balls and they're all close together. So this is very much like the strings are kind of exploding out of the forms. And I think the one that has the one that really does the best job with the form is that first one of like this one. So I'm hoping that as I work on the installation, like this one has like that tiny, it has like the big expansion of the energy and then it shrinks into this little bead. And then it has the big expansion of energy and then it shrinks into the connection here. And then it has the pipes that are more like a traditional prayer bead of like the little pieces and the little knots in between them. So I think, I think that's a really good point to like, as I keep working on these strands to make sure that like they have the pieces in between them. I need more cans and things that are going to be like, I've got the pipe for this one. That's like the bead or like it's over here. I can show you. Like this one. Got like this pipe is like the tiny bead for this strand. And so it's kind of, like trying to, oh wait, am I going the right way? Yeah. The pipe and then the strand. Yeah. And then it connects to another strand. But like, I think you're right. Like getting to those tiny points in between so that there's the contrast of like the big energy kind of exploding. That's like kind of maybe life energy but also like that could also kind of harken that things out of the problem is out of control of waste and resources and all that, the bigness of things, but then coming into the making sure there's that contrast, I think you're right, will be really important.
Right, because you can't have one without the other. We live in this duality, so you can't have expansion without contraction. And the more if you really want expansion, contraction is absolutely necessary.
And that's what that's right. I think like that idea of containment was a really important, or just like how energy kind of moves through us. And then when we have this body for a while and then we leave it and the energy moves through something else. And it's like, we're kind of like beads on this energy thread. And like, so making sure we have enough things making sure I have enough things as I work on the install, because this is like the first time I've had them up in a row like this. So I think there's a lot to still figure out as far as like making sure there's transitions between them that read as beads to get that idea. I really wanted to get that idea of like holding holders and vessels as the bead, and then the flowingness as that thread moving through. So I think working on that some more will be really important.
I mean, if you thought about creating a musical piece that demonstrated prayer beads, and they would have pauses, in between, and then the bead would have a certain different quality than the interstices. If you had a musical piece, you could hear it similar.
Yeah.
Did you see Bill's comment?
Maybe call them perfect.
You kind of focusing as much on the thread as the bead itself. In some ways, you're focusing more on the energy flowing through, aren't you? Is that right?
Yeah, I think right now, yeah.
I mean, that when you were explaining about that explosion of energy that then comes down and goes through, and then the explosion. And usually when I think about like a rosary or other prayer beads, the thread is mostly invisible and mostly the beads are what you're seeing. And you've kind of opened up the thing that's passing through the bead.
Yeah, yeah.
Fun.
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
Cool.
Well, all right, I think we have reached the end of our meeting here tonight. I want to thank all of you for coming, and especially huge thank you to NextFab and Leah for making this whole huge, wonderful thing happen.
Thank you.
I just want to double down on these dates, is that April 6th through the 27th is when Leah's show is going to be up at Da Vinci Art Alliance, and there's going to be all sorts of workshops that Leah's going to lead, which I believe is some paper making.
Yeah, we'll do the paper making process. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again, everyone. And if you happen to be in South Philly, feel free to stop by Da Vinci Art Alliance. We are open from Wednesdays to Sundays, 11 to 5.
We have a lot of cool stuff all the time.
A lot of cool stuff all the time. You heard it first. Have a wonderful night, everyone. And I don't know, maybe don't throw out so much stuff tonight and maybe recycle it.